Hi everyone, I'm really glad to be here with you all. This is my second time here in Krakow on the Impact conference, but first time from this side and from this perspective. Andreas, before we start talking about mobility, what is your role in BMW?
Yeah, I've got a lengthy title that goes like that: steering governments, external relations, and sustainability communication. And it really is the central function in Munich, given that we in the headquarters have to deal with everything that relates to policies, from trade policy issues to corporate social responsibility. And this is all in my team.
Mm-hmm. And how do you understand this statement that mobility is becoming versatile? Do you agree or not?
Well, from my point of view, mobility has been always versatile, right? We have different modes of transportation. We all, do walking. We all ride bicycles. People ride horses. People drive their own cars. People actually go via public transportation and so on and so on. So mobility has been traditionally versatile because the human nature and the human need for mobility is super versatile. And that's one of the big advantages of mobility, to be flexible in an ideal case. Now, what is changing, certainly in the last years, is that we see the advent of the sharing economy. So the idea of owning something is, and you have heard that obviously during the course of the conference here today, the idea of owning things is becoming less relevant to people. Different cultures, different nations, different areas of the world acting differently there, but overall it's clearly a trend. That is one thing, and people start to think a little bit more about the environmental impact, right? Mm-hmm. So these topics are moving into the world of mobility, and we need, as a 100-years-old company, BMW is, we need to really think what that means for us.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, what is the role of BMW in this? Yes, right? How BMW intends to play a leading role to leverage new mobility trends? Like, what kind of concept do you test globally and locally?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have been now 100 years in the mobility business as BMW. Mm-hmm. We started once upon a time in 1916 with aero engines, but very early in the 1920s we started with motorcycles and cars and so on and so on. And in the last 100 years, it was relatively easy for us to do business. We were producing cars last year, 2.4 million. We brought them to the dealers. They sold it to the customers. There was a little bit of service and so on and so on. But that whole idea of doing business in the mobility sphere didn't really change very much in the last 100 years. But now we are moving from a car manufacturer really to a mobility provider. And you've heard that probably before during the course of the conference. But it's actually happening. Mm-hmm. And just to give you one example, Drive Now, and I've seen references made to Drive Now as BMW and Sixt car sharing program early on today as well during the conference. Drive Now is something that we offer in many European markets already today, and also in the US. We have close to 1 million customers, and it's all about car sharing. So there is no customer actually buying a Drive Now vehicle, but rather renting for a limited amount of time, sometimes only minutes, sometimes hours, but rarely longer than a day. And this car sharing is one sign for a changing business environment, and BMW is moving that road. There's another aspect to it, that is autonomous driving, and there we are at the early stages, obviously, right? We see huge potential there, and that's besides decarbonization, so taking the fossil fuel out of the mobility equation. The question of going the road to autonomous driving is the other big paradigm shift. And for BMW, for our company, it is either being subject to that change and being the driver of that change, or being obsolete over time. Mm-hmm. And we clearly run for the first option. We clearly run for driving the change.
Mm-hmm. And what key drivers will support new mobility concepts globally within the next decade?
Yeah, I mentioned that before. You know, decarbonization is certainly the big thing. And you've seen probably downstairs in the hallway there is a 7 Series plug-in hybrid vehicle, which already to date drives a certain amount of kilometers, a certain distance with a pure electric drive. We have the most successful electric vehicle in the Polish market, I understand, is a BMW. That's the i3, the full battery electric vehicle. So decarbonization is really coming forward. Just to give you another number, in the last 3 years, between 2013 and 2016, we've sold around 100,000 electric vehicles already, plug-in hybrids and full battery electric vehicles. This year alone, in 2017, we are going to sell another 100,000. So the curve is really, or the curve is really ramping up. It's really accelerating.
So what do you think, which European city will be first in introducing that kind of new transport approach on a large scale, you know?
Yeah, you know, there are different levels of development, one has to clearly say. And we all know about, Norway being the new Jerusalem, so to say, for all these topics, electric mobility, also sharing economy, and so on and so on. The Netherlands are very much forward, but I'll give you one example from Copenhagen in Denmark, where we have a project with the local transportation company, Arriva. We have in Copenhagen 400 of these BMW i3 full electric cars in a car sharing scheme. So every Drive Now car in Copenhagen is really a full electric car. And we have also an established link to the public transportation system. So the Copenhagen citizen has a so-called Reisecard, which is a little card that allows access to means of transportation. So you can, with one card, access a Drive Now car, you can do your bicycle sharing, you can actually take a bus, you can take a light rail, and this all works in one integrated system. So Copenhagen, in that respect, is certainly something you can consider to be relatively far advanced. There's another project that I would like to show you in a little film, if you don't mind, and that is a project in Berlin, and I would like to ask for the film now.
In Berlin, multimodality is gaining more and more in significance. Nevertheless, the number of passenger cars continues to increase. Half of the cars are more than 10 years old. On average, each car is parked for more than 23 hours every day, causing parking spaces to be scarce in many neighborhood areas. Rolf and his family reside in Charlottenburg, and they really cherish their neighborhood. Many other young families reside in the area where Rolf and his family live. Idea of the project: to find residents who move their cars away to provide spaces for innovative mobility services and enhanced living quality. 13 residents took part and moved their cars away for 2 weeks. 6 ideas to revitalize the living quality. Before, inactive space. After, bike sharing, urban gardening, public seating, car sharing, e-scooter, and junior driving school. For a higher living quality in public areas. Many residents enriched the project with ideas such as recreation, living quality, and urban gardening. The initiative introduced ideas such as sustainable mobility, provided spaces for car sharing and e-scooter services, transforming the neighborhood into an attractive environment for all age groups. The special spirit of voluntary off-street parkers made the project week a success for all. Neighborhoods like this exist everywhere, in every city. We can reshape urban life if we begin with the right ideas.
So what you saw there was an example from Berlin, and it's admittingly a small-scale thing, right? So it's one of these things that you really start on a very local level and try to figure out how life can be without owning a car, but rather sharing. There are numerous studies which actually confirm that between 6 and 8 normal cars are no longer needed when you have a car-sharing car. That's because of the higher utility rate of car-sharing cars, which are used more. And the space you gain, right, you can really give back to the citizens. And that is one of these things that we are striving for right now, that we are working on, because as a company, we understand that we need to think mobility different and new. So obviously, on the one hand, there's the old business, if you like, and that is going to be with us for many, many years to come. On the other hand, we need to build up and ramp up our capabilities and our knowledge and our corporations when it comes to new mobility patterns, specifically in the cities. That's highly important, right?
You know, I'm wondering who will win in this race, you know, because from first look, it seems that automotive companies can lose their long-term competitive edge, you know, like car economics, dynamics, and safety will no longer be a key for successful car sales, you know, like, what do you think about it?
Well, on the one hand, we've seen today during the conference many, many innovative ideas from startups, right?
Yeah.
And you can always argue that in the last 100 years, the mobility market, also in terms of new entrants to the business, was much more static, right? So there's a big dynamics now in that field. And BMW is actually also investing in mobility startups. We have an own venture capital firm that is called iVentures, where we actually move into that field as well. But on the other hand, you know, the car companies, mobility providers, if you like now, they have a huge amount of experience in bringing innovation into the market. So we know the customers, we know what they need. We also understand how mobility is changing and evolving. And when you think about autonomous driving and many other things, they will rely on innovation and technology. And that is our core business since a century. So I'm very optimistic, I have to say. And you know, that's not because I intend to work another 20 years with BMW, but I'm really optimistic that we as a company can really drive that change and define new mobility patterns as well.
Okay. So maybe, do you see any space for Polish companies or startups to benefit from this unstoppable trend, as you said?
Yeah, you know, we were discussing that earlier today with many of our Polish friends and partners here. What we see is change, okay? And while I was just stating that I'm optimistic that the auto industry has some, let's say, some good assets to also move forward into the next century, there's obviously, when there's change, there is opportunity. And you know, as the market for mobility is changing, there's room for startups, but you know, the key for everything and anything is, as banal as it sounds, is innovation. So there is room for new business models. There is room for Polish startups, no question about it, as much as for German startups, US startups, you name it. But you really need to bring something to the table that is convincing for the customer, you know. And as I say, BMW is looking for startups. We are investing in startups, and we are taking not nationalities, but you know, assets in terms of innovation.
Okay, last question, Andreas. Spoiler alert. How the future car will look like? What do you think it was to look like?
It will have
like
a BMW badge.
living rooms with wheels, or with like additional jacuzzi in premium?
Yeah, you know, the jacuzzi thing is probably a nice option that might be really realistic in the future. It depends a little bit what car you think. At BMW, we are very much convinced that a BMW always will have a steering wheel, for example. So there's always, you know, for our customers, we think there's a desire to also enjoy driving. And that is probably, you know, for us true, but for other, you know, players in the market, it may be totally different.
Yeah, Andreas, thank you very much. And thank you guys for listening.